Hello, Harry. Ahoy! Welcome to part 4 of Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I've neglected to talk about a major event that has happened since this coronavirus has come into play. The leaked call between Taylor Swift and Kanye West and his wife Kim. What a celebration. The vindication of Miss Swift. This pirate has lived a rough life upon the seas, doing manly things with his manly musket. But every once in a while he enjoys knowing what it's like to be a young 20-something-year-old girl who is in love, going through heartbreak and happiness. And I always had my Taylor Swift to take me to these faraway lands. And then that infamous phone call of 2016 robbed me of my joy of Taylor Swift. How could I follow such a two-faced liar? And then the 2020 vindication. So let us celebrate. Know your sound? Nothing lasts forever. So this is going good now. Alright. Kanye and Kim, I knew something was wrong with him. Kanye should be shot in the barnacles. Perhaps he'll make Kim walk off the plank and float forever on the sea with her plastic body. Alright, enough of entertainment. Let's get to classic entertainment with the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Let's see, we left off part 3 last time. The Ancient Mariner has been telling his story to the young man, the wedding guest. The story that started with him grabbing the wedding guest and saying there was a ship. And where we left off, the mariner had related that the albatross had been tied around his neck. He and his people are stuck at sea, and a weird boat with Death and his wife had come along. And Death's wife, Death's mate, Life and Death perhaps? Oh yes, that's what it was, Life and Death, has won the crew. The phantom ship takes off, or the skeleton ship takes off, and the mariner's left getting stank eye from his whole crew. And as they're all giving him stank eye, one by one they drop dead and their souls fly off. Which leads us to the start of part 4. Luckily we have a gloss here in part 4 that says the wedding guest feareth the spirit is talking to him. Without that gloss, I don't know how you would know the wedding guest is the one talking. But the wedding guest exclaims, I fear thee, ancient mariner, I fear thy skinny hand, and thou art long, lank, and brown, as is the ribbed sea sand. I fear thee, and thy glittering eye, and thy skinny hand so brown. So, the wedding guest says, oh my gosh, are you telling me that you died upon this day, and now I'm talking to a ghost? But he makes this interesting metaphor here, where he says, I fear thy skinny hand, and thou art long and lank and brown, as is the ribbed sea sand. You get the metaphor between the ancient mariner who's talking to the wedding guest, and the wedding guest says, you look just like a sandy shore. This is ironic because the ancient mariner, up to this point in his story, seems to not care about nature at all. He's killed the albatross thoughtlessly. When they're stuck out upon the sea, he says specifically, the very date did rot, O Christ, that ever should this be. Yeah, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. And then you have the description of bioluminescence and St. Elmo's fire with death fires and the water burnt like witches' oils. All very negative descriptions of the natural world. And here, the mariner is being compared to something in the natural world. Perhaps Coleridge is saying, the narrator, even though at this part in the story, he seems to not have any love for nature or the happenings in the natural world, he's associating the mariner with the natural world. Alright, so the wedding guest has given his expression of fear. And the ancient mariner, back on line 230, answers, fear not, thou wedding guest, this body drop not down. And in the gloss it says, but the ancient mariner assureth him his body life, and proceedeth to relate his horrible penance, or the price he must pay for killing the albatross. So he assures the wedding guest, "Do not fear. Everybody else died, but I did not die. I am a living thing talking to you right now." And then he picks back up his story when he's stuck on the sea with these dead bodies all around. "Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea, and never a saint took pity on my soul in agony." You have him mentioning a saint here, out of Catholic teachings, where you have the saints who seem to do the work of like lesser gods. So this characterizes the mariner as a Christian. However, the narrator of the whole story, who writes the glosses, claims that there is a nature spirit, not a saint, but some divine being following them and taking retribution on the mariner and the crew. So the crew is all now dead, and the mariner is being tortured by this nature spirit. Okay, and now he's all alone on the sea with these dead people all around him. "The many men so beautiful, and they all dead did lie, and 1,000,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I." And according to the gloss, he, the ancient mariner, despised the creatures of the calm. So his crew is all dead, and he looks over into the sea, and he sees these slimy creatures living out upon the sea. So he's probably thinking to himself, "Oh, these damned ugly natural animals, they're still alive while all these men are dead." He continues on line 240. "I looked upon the rotting sea, and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the rotting deck, and there the dead men lay." According to the gloss, "And the mariner envieth that they should live, and so many lie dead, they being the animals upon the slimy sea. I looked to heaven, I tried to pray," like any Christian would. "I looked to heaven and tried to pray, but or ever a prayer had gushed, a wicked whisper came, and made my heart as dry as dust." So he tries to pray to the heavens for help or salvation in this situation, but he says there's something about the world that will not let him pray. "I closed my lids and kept them closed, and the balls like pulses beat." So apparently, if you're dying of hydration, you can feel, I guess some of you have had a headache where you feel your eyeballs beating within your head. So he's having the same thing happen. "I closed my lids and kept them closed, and the balls like pulses beat. For the sky and the sea and the sea and the sky lay like a load upon my weary eye, and the dead were at my feet." Calling back to one of your descriptions of the ancient mariner looking like Meursault in Camus, I can't help but think at this moment perhaps Camus was inspired by this poem to create Meursault out there, an enemy of the natural world who senselessly commits murder just like the mariner did. Alright, and the next stanza, beginning with line 253, he describes the people, the men on the deck, the dead men. "The cold sweat melted from their limbs, nor rot nor reek did they. The look with which they looked on me had never passed away." So the crew is all dead, their souls have flown away, but their bodies, unrotting, lie on the deck with that look in their eyes, that stank eye that they had died with, all staring at him saying, "How dare you get us into this situation?" According to the gloss, "The curse liveth for him in the eye of the dead men." 257. "An orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high, but oh, more horrible than that is the curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die." Oh, you love the poetry of this, don't you, Perry? Alright, so 7 days, 7 nights, he lives alone on the ship with dead men all staring at them with their unrotting, unblinking eyes, saying, "What did you do?" Then a description of what's going on outside of the boat. "The moving moon," and moon is capitalized here, "the moving moon went up the sky, and nowhere did she abide. Softly she was going up, and a star or two beside." And then you get this description in the gloss that makes no sense to me. Something about, "In his loneliness and fixedness, he yearneth towards the journeying moon," which makes sense to me that he sees the moon journeying across the sky and says, "I'm stuck here on this ship, I'm stuck in this place, and I wish I was like the moon, traveling somewhere." And then you get a description of stars traveling across the sky to their homes makes no sense to me, because stars always move. Or perhaps he's wishing that he could be dying or disappear like the stars as they travel across the sky and go to the place where they lie. But there is this connection between the mariner looking up at the moon and being like, I wish I was like you. So he still feels this distance between him and the natural world. And moon is capitanized here, like he and him in the Bible. So you have this comparison with the moon, with this divine being. So you get this nature spirit idea out of here from the narrator of the poem, who is not the ancient mariner. So it gets a little confusing, like those little Russian dolls that you get. You have the poem that's being told by a narrator who explains that an ancient mariner goes up to a wedding guest, and within that story you have the mariner telling his own story. But the narrator of the entire story seems to imply that there are nature spirits all around who are affecting the mariner's movements, while the mariner himself tends to compare everything to a Christian point of view. Alright, so the mariner is looking out up upon the moon and the stars traveling across the sky and saying, I wish I could be like you. And then he looks down and describes the ocean. Her beams bemocked the sultry main. He's talking about the moonbeams, bemock, or they make fun of the sultry main, his view that there is an endless expanse of sea. Like April hoarfrost spread. Okay, hoarfrost. Many times you've probably heard, or maybe even used the word whore to describe not what what the mariner's describing here. H-O-A-R is an archaic word for white. Growing up, my dad would always point at the trees. If you know how dew forms on the grass outside when there's a certain amount of humidity and the temperature drops below a certain point. The same thing happens when it's freezing cold. If you have a bunch of humidity in the air and the temperature drops below a certain temperature, you will have condensation gathering upon everything around it and turning everything white. This is the hoarfrost he's talking about. It looks almost as if everything is covered in snow, but it's a frost. But he's using this as a metaphor to say this natural, beautiful occurrence of hoarfrost covering everything in the winter. This is what the ocean looked like. So you have a change here in his description of nature. He had said up to this point, nature is, what are they? The very deep, rotting, slimy things upon the slimy sea. Now he says this moon, which is capitalized in the story, puts its moonbeams down on the ocean and covers it like hoarfrost spread, this view of natural wonder. But this is mixed in with the description of the bioluminescence when he says, but where the ship's huge shadow lay, as he's looking over the side, he sees in the shadow of the ship, where the ship's blocking the moonbeams. But where the ship's huge shadow lay, the charmed water burnt away, a still and awful red. So you have this mixture of, in the shadow, you have these ugly bioluminescent things, while the moon is shining this beautiful hoarfrost look upon it. But it's still reminding him that he is all alone on this wide, wide sea. The mariner goes on to describe what's going on beyond the shadow of the ship. So you have the shadow, and then beyond the shadow of the ship on the white sea, he says, beyond the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. Apparently there's some sort of water snakes out there. Eels or ocean snakes. Which snakes are something, they scare me. They scare Pele, they scare Perry. But he watches these water snakes, this man who hates nature, and he says, they moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. And according to the gloss, by the light of the moon, the mariner beholdeth God's creatures of the great calm. So he sees these water snakes. And you have a change in language here, where you have elfish light falling off their bodies as they rear or buck up like a horse from the ocean. And the drops of water fall off in white flakes. So you have positive connotations with these words, like elfish light and hoary flakes. Then he turns his attention to what's going on in the shadow of the ship. Within the shadow ship, I watched their rich attire, so I guess the snakes have swum within the shadow of the ship now. Blue, glossy green, and velvet black, they coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. So note the difference in the language here. Something has changed in the story as the mariner looks at these water snakes and uses words like golden fire and velvet black and glossy green instead of the words that he used previously, like, where did it go? Slimy things that crawl with legs upon the slimy sea, death fires and witches' oils. Now we have glossy greens and velvet blacks and flashes of golden fire. And in the very next stanza, the mariner exclaims, "Oh, happy living things, no tongue their beauty might declare. A spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware." And then the gloss says, "The beauty of the snakes and their happiness have inspired the ancient mariner to exclaim, 'Oh, happy living things.'" And he blessed them in his heart. So he doesn't say, "Bless you, happy living things," but according to the gloss, within him there's a change where he says, "These living things are beautiful. They're not something to be mocked. They're something to be beheld." And the part 4 ends with the description, "The self-same moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea." So the moment he looks at nature and these living things in nature and says, "Oh my God, these are beautiful. These two are God's creatures," the spell begins to break. The albatross falls off his neck, merges with the sea, and the ancient mariner has made an acknowledgement that the natural world is something beautiful. This is a change from the start where the ancient mariner has been cursing the natural world, arbitrarily killing albatrosses, and feels like he's cut off from the rest of the world. So as he sees these animals swimming around and realizes these are beautiful, we're all part of the same team, the spell begins to break. So again, you have this Christian idea that there's a saint who takes pity on him, but in the larger view of the story, you know there's a nature spirit who is punishing him, and at the moment that this nature spirit knows that he appreciates nature, the spell begins to break. Alright, and that is the end of part 4. Anything else I want to cover? Kim's covered, Kanye's covered. Just guess we'll sing our way out of here. Skip trial here. Let's see. Doesn't continuously play. But I loves it so well. And when you have our very last kiss, my last kiss is, say you'll remember me, standing in a nice dress, staring at the sunset, pale, red lips and rosy cheeks.